Right, Sunday morning, team run, out for the long run, about 80 minutes, so a bit shorter than usual because we both had a crack at a park run yesterday. This week's video is all about some testing I've done in the last couple of weeks and comparing back to some results from December / this time last year. Before we start, thank you to the 20 or so of you that hit that subscribe button last week. We're now well into the 900s and it's much appreciated. Hope you enjoy. See you later. Right then, it is Sunday the 21st. It is almost 8 AM and you were meant to just sit nicely. Right then, it is Sunday the 21st. It's almost 8 AM. The boss hasn't stirred yet, so I thought I'd get a head start on filming what this week's YouTube video is going to be about. And Bryn and I are going to run you through my bike and run testing in particular that I've done in the last couple of weeks. Now, it's the end of January. Most people will be starting to test themselves. Either they've just got back into training, want to see where they're at, get their zones in the sort of correct ballpark, or like myself, you've been training for a few months now and you're looking to try and see if you've got hopefully back to at least where you were potentially in some of the rough numbers you might use, or if you've actually pushed on a little bit and your bike power's gone up, your run speed, etc. Obviously, that's the goal for everybody. Now, I am going to run you through my bike test and a run test that I've done and sort of give you some background as to where I've been before, where I'm at now, and hopefully where I may get to. So we'll start with the bike. So as of last year, I started using a ramp test, but in a 3-minute steps rather than the more traditional ramp test in 1 minute. Now last year, pretty much at the same time, a bit later, at the start of February, I went to see a friend of mine called Jack at Box Nutrition, based in the West Midlands in Birmingham. And I went to see him because for the first time in my life, I had my lactate taken at the same time as doing the bike test, which was really useful. One of the main reasons for doing it that way was more to see my metabolism and what my fat burning capabilities were like, rather than the lactate numbers. And then I didn't actually use or didn't plan to then train with a lactate monitor, throughout the year. But what we got from that was, for the first time, a really good indication of where LT1 and LT2 are. That's your aerobic and anaerobic thresholds, basically, and is becoming more of a prevalent metrics to measure yourself on, particularly for the long distance game, as that LT1 when fit is hopefully what you might aim at for an Ironman, as an example. So the higher you can have that, the better. In that test, I've got some screenshots to put up here, but in that test we basically came out that my LT1 was somewhere between the step of 225 and 250 watts. So the test went up in 25 watt intervals, and the heart rate at which my lactate turned was around 145 beats per minute, which pretty much aligns to what heart rate I would ride at in an Ironman and had done previously. So that was fairly good. And my LT2 was somewhere between the 300 and 325 watt step, and my heart rate for the turn there was at 164. So we had some really solid data points that was where we expected to get. We did then press on and do 1 minute efforts after the lactate turn to sort of get an absolute VO2 score, but we haven't used that or replicated that in the testing I've done recently. On the 11th of January, I did my first bike test, and we effectively replicated the same test where we went up in 3-minute chunks. However, the goal was to go to failure on the 3-minute steps. So if I did complete the 325 step, it would be 350, 385 and 415, which would be a huge ask. But rather than making it 1 minute steps, obviously I didn't have a VO2 monitor and taking my lactate, so we weren't looking at what an absolute VO2 score was. We were looking at how good I was at shuttling lactate and how long can I go on past my LT2. So what were the results? So for LT1, the results look pretty similar. My heart rate was slightly higher for the 255 watt stage at 149. But so we can almost definitely say that my LT1 is in between that. What the step before would have been 225 and this was 255, and I'm probably towards the north end of that, which is good. My worst fear was it would turn in the 225 step, and I wasn't expecting it to turn in the 290 step, if that makes sense. LT2, and this is where it gets somewhat good in the 320 watt step. My heart rate average was 163, so bang on that 164 from the previous test in the lab. So we can confidently say that that's pretty much where my LT2 is, and that's 320 watts, which is where my FTP has been for the last, 3, 4, 5 years. So that's pretty good. What is then encouraging, I managed to do the full 350 watt step, and I managed to almost get the 385 step done. I got about 2 minutes 30 into it. And by using erg mode, for those, if you do a ramp test, once you lose your cadence, you're kind of done for. So I got further than I thought I would. I thought I'd get through the 350 and then I'd really struggle from the offset on the 385. So to get so far was brilliant. And the goal is to do this test again in about 6 to 8 weeks time before we go to Mallorca. And effectively the goal is to complete that step and hopefully get in well into the 415 watt step. We will also do the second test with lactate with my coach and sort of really benchmark it against the February score. So really good as a benchmark. I'm pretty much as fit as I was last year. And the encouraging thing is I haven't actually done any hard bike training yet. So to sort of replicate and get into the ballpark of where I was in February. In February last year, I'd been to Lanzarote for 10 days. I'd done way more training on the bike. So to get back to that level, and I haven't actually done a VO2 block yet and so forth, it is a really good indicator that I hopefully, for the first time in a number of years, I'm going to see my thresholds raised that little bit, which is brilliant. The last thing to point out, just for the number geeks out there, I currently weigh 70 to 71 kilos. Normally when I'm in my racing snake shape, I'm sort of 68, 69 kilos. So I'm not in that race weight category, but yeah, around the 70 kilo mark for full relevance. So the run is a bit different, as I effectively did a park run yesterday, and it was pretty much a full gas park run. Now I'll get my excuses in early. I didn't have a warm up basically. I spent about 7 or 8 minutes jogging around trying to find some athletes that were doing it, but I didn't do any strides, I didn't do any drills, I didn't do any sort of activation like I normally would, and I kind of went into it sort of cold. It was very cold, and just went for it. So I do think a little warm-up would have benefited me. December the 2nd, I went to do a more social park run with some friends. And as ever at park run, I got a bit carried away. Now back in December, I wasn't running much. I was doing sort of 25, 30K a week. I had done 0 speed work, and I hadn't really run much faster than sort of 5 minutes per K unless Bryn was attached to me. So in December, I did a 5K park run. I took it as a sort of build run. I can see from the splits, I started at 420 per K and I dropped it down to sort of 402. But what I've done is captured the last sort of 8-9 minutes, the last 2K of the park run, where from memory, I was running as hard as I could, and I wasn't really seeing the pace reflect that to what I usually see numbers wise. For example, it was still in the 4 minutes per K range rather than 3 something. But what you can see here is my average heart rate was 171 and my max heart rate was 175, which for me is pretty much as high as it can go. I only ever see it in the 180s when I'm super duper ooper unfit and I do something hard. But I would say that's 9 or so minutes of full gas running, and I've only come out at 357 per K pace according to this, which is, fast, but it's nowhere near sort of the fastest pace I'm capable of. And if we compare that to yesterday's park run, so I ran it in bang on 17:30, which is an average pace of 3:30 per K. And as you can see, my average heart rate was actually lower than that Rickmansworth park run by a couple of beats. And my max heart rate was nigh on the same, if not 1 beat lower. So same sort of effort, but obviously for the full park run this time. And I've run sort of 35, 40 seconds a K quicker. So that shows a real improvement between December and January. That's basically 6 weeks. The difference in that 6 weeks is a little bit of a ramp up in volume, and I have started doing some treadmill sessions with some speed in them, and in particular the last 2 weeks, including this week, which I would argue is one of the hardest run sessions I've done in terms of effort. I did 4 lots of 4 minutes and 4 lots of 1 minute. At around that 3:25 pace. That was sort of what I had in my head as sort of something to aim at for Saturday. But that was a good 20 minutes worth of work on the treadmill on Tuesday, and then the park run on Saturday with a VO2 bike session on Thursday evening, which was pretty brutal as well. So by no means sort of fresh, if you like, but pretty happy with that. My official PB, I think, is 16:58, although parkrun have it as 17:02, but around that 17-minute mark. I have run sub 35 for a 10K, so I've done what I did yesterday 2 times through and a bit quicker. So there's definitely scope to go, and we'll see where I get to. Hopefully I can get back to sub 17, and maybe in May we'll give it a crack and see where I've got to, and hopefully coming off a batch of racing where I've hit some PBs off the bike. So that's running and biking. Now, swimming is an interesting one. So if you're new around here, throughout sort of October, November, I was struggling with a bit of an ankle niggle. I had MRIs, I had a steroid injection, which was useless. It was effectively put in the wrong place, not through the fault of the doctors. And we had this niggle that only affected me swimming. Now, in the last few weeks, I believe we finally got to the bottom of it. And the physio at HPO, Alison, has done a great job where she's basically manipulated my ankle once a week to free up my calcaneum joint, and effectively we think something was getting caught in there when I was at the extreme end of planting my foot, which you are when you're swimming, particularly front crawl. That has prevented me doing sort of normal swimming or high volumes of normal swimming without a pool buoy, without fins, without sort of toys, if that makes sense. So I've somewhat got back to being able to swim now without a pool buoy. Obviously, it's nice swimming with a pool buoy. It helps your body position and all that sort of good stuff. But in order to sort of reliably test my fitness and do potentially a CSS test or a 1500 metre time trial or whatever you use, I'd need to be able and confident to do that without sort of flaring that up, if that makes sense. So I think in the coming weeks, I'll be in that situation. I've also obviously been hounding the internet via Instagram for kind of clues, tips, hints to fix bits of my technique, which is something I'd like to try and correct before I potentially, try and do loads of testing in the water for speed, if you like. To improve your technique, you're going to need to slow things down a little bit before you potentially go quicker. So I'm off to see Stuart Swim Cube on Wednesday in 3-4 days time, and I've also booked in to see him at the start of March, so 5 weeks later, and hopefully I can get some video stuff done in between as well to check in with what hopefully I'm working on. One test I have done was 10 lots of 200 at sort of threshold effort on Friday just gone, and on the latter reps, in particular reps 3 and 7, I counted my strokes. I'm in a 50 metre pool, and the average stroke per length was around 40 to 42, which is in the good category. That's over a metre per stroke I'm pulling, which is good. So hopefully I can repeat that, or that's the kind of thing I'm looking at to see how well I'm swimming at the moment, rather than, what's my 400 or 200 time. I am also frightened of doing a 400, 200 in this long course pool, because I've never done one in a long course pool. I've only ever done it in a short course pool. But we will cross that bridge when we come to it. So swimming, there's going to be a bit of a focus on technique. The volume's gone up. I've done back-to-back weeks at 17K. By the end of January, I think I would have swam the most I ever have in a month, and hopefully that becomes sustainable. So that's an improvement. Yeah, long may it continue. There we go. That is where I'm at now, fitness-wise. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. All my data is on Strava if you were somebody that wanted to go and look at things in more detail or be a bit nosy. And if you have any questions, please ask. I have a lazy GSP here. Look, these are meant to be the most active dogs. Bryn, are you going to say hello? Or are you just sleeping? Cheers.